Let's talk microblades. Welcome back to Brow Tab and welcome to my microblading studio. This is a channel for beauty artists who are ready to take their business, their income, their clientele, and their skills to the next level. I'm Alex, your host, a microblading artist, a microblading studio owner, product creator, and online education platform educator who wants to help you do the same thing. Today we are going to talk all about microblades, so let's dive in. Microblades are one of my favorite tools to talk about. I've been microblading for almost 9 years. I've also created my own suite of microblades, fully assembled, fully disposable microblades. So I think it is very important for all artists to understand the anatomy of a microblade, how it's assembled, how it's put together, how it actually works, but also how all of the sizes, lengths, diameters, and thickness can affect your results and affect which blade you're going to choose for each client. The first place to start is the main two styles of microblades. So there is a fully pre-assembled tool. These are brow tab tools. These are the blades that I have created, crafted, and sell online for you to purchase. But basically what this is it is the handle and the blade already pre-attached with a lid. And they come fully sealed and sterilized. All you need to do is peel them open, take the lid off, and start blading. The original form of microblades come as a handle and a blade. What you need to do is you need to put this blade into this handle before you can actually start microblading, before you can actually start your service. So, little side story here. This, when I first trained 9 years ago, was basically the only style of microblade available. You had to pre-assemble it yourself. And I struggled. Like, I was there fumbling around with this blade. My hands were like sweating out of my gloves to put this blade in at the correct height, because of course you have to decide what the height is at the correct angle. You have to decide what the correct angle is, and that was my biggest struggle when I was training to actual microblade. It wasn't mapping, it wasn't making strokes, it wasn't communicating, doing consults with my clients. It was putting together this blade. And the great thing about that was that it made me want to create brow tab. It made me want to create these pre-assembled blades so that new artists and all artists alike could actually just peel open, take the lid off, and start blading without having to assemble. So while these are still great tools, these will save you a lot of stress and anxiety. So whether you choose a pre-assembled blade like the brow tab pens or one that you have to assemble yourself, there are two main different types of actual blades. So we have a U blade. You can see here that it is shaped like a U. That's where it gets its name. Or what's called a curved and sometimes a slant blade. So you can see that it's more of like a knife-like slanted curved shape. Whether you are saying curved or slant, it means the same thing. It is this style of a blade. Sometimes it'll also be recognized on the label as a C or an S, whereas the U blade will always be called a U blade, and it will be a U on the label. Now, one of these styles is not better than the other. They have uses for different clients and different kind of stroke styles, but I find they are also really just what feels good in your hand. Okay, so definitely try both of them if you haven't yet, but choose what is feeling good to you. And sometimes I will honestly be on a U-blade kick for a few months, just loving them. One day I'll decide to change it up and be like, damn, I miss using a curved or a slant blade. It really just is how they feel in your hand. The great thing about U-blades are creating a more curved stroke, especially towards the top of your stroke. So for clients who want thinner brows where you're curving them a lot more, a lot of times for our older clients, U-blades are amazing for that. For our 90s clients who are missing the underneath part of their brows, I love using a curved or slant blade to really create that structure in the base. While both of these styles can be created with both types of blades, those are just my go-to picks based on what my client needs and what they're looking for. So we know we have two different types of assemblies. We have two different kind of styles of the shape of the blade. But what is the anatomy of a microblade? What actually makes up this blade that allows us to create these beautiful strokes and deposit pigment in our client's skin? Well, if you look really closely at any microblade, you can see that it's not actually a blade. It's not a scalpel. It is a whole bunch of tiny little pins, tiny little needles. We're tattooing, right? So tiny little needles in a row, whether it's in a U or in a curved shape, that are creating this blade, this microblade. And this is what allows us to actually flick the pigment through the skin as we are making our strokes. So yes, if let's say we had a scalpel, which please don't do, but hypothetically speaking, if we had a scalpel and we were using that to make hair strokes in our client's skin, yeah, it would open up the skin. Yeah, there would be pigment that would go in there. But what makes this so different is that it is actually flicking it through. And that is where we get the really cool Velcro-like sound when we're making our strokes in that perfect depth in the skin. These little pins are flicking as they go through the skin, perfectly depositing pigment. So that is your anatomy of the microblade. So based on what size blade you have. So when we break down sizes are based on how many pins. So whether it's a U blade or a curved blade, there's still a count of pins. If you look really, really closely, you'd be able to count them yourself. So this one here has 18 pins, so we call it an 18 U blade. This one here is a 14 pin curved blade, so it'd be a 14C or 14S, depending on the brand that you choose. However many pins in there make up the microblade itself. Besides that, there are so many pins in each of these blades. Now, each one of these pins is a round circular needle, right? If you think of a tattoo needle, a singular tattoo needle is one needle. So each one of these pins has its own, it's a circle, right? At the end, a very, very small circle, but it's a circle. It has its own diameter. So that makes up the diameter of the blade. So that is when you look at your packaging, we're getting to the third number. So the first number is your 18U. So that's what we got right here is an 18U blade, right? So it says 18 pins and it is a U blade. The next number you can see here says 16 millimeters. So 16 millimeters is the diameter of each one of these pins, which means it's the diameter of the blade. This one here is a 14C, and the diameter of these pins is 8.18 millimeters. So the diameter of these pins is a tiny bit bigger than the diameter of these pins. And the diameter is what we are talking about when we are talking about nano blades or ultra nano blades. So these are basically words that were just made up to describe the diameter of these blades because they are getting to be so small. This here is an old style 14C hard blade, and this has a 0.2 diameter. So 0.20 millimeter diameter. Whereas this one here is a 14C with a 0.18 millimeter diameter. So if you're looking at these two blades, they look very different, even though they're still 14 pins, because a diameter of 0.2 versus a diameter of 0.18 is 0.02 millimeters difference for each one of these pins, which adds up. Now, the reason why I say this is an older style blade and this is a newer style blade is because we are able to make the diameter so much smaller. Technology has evolved to the sense of nanoblading, ultra nanoblading, where we can use these super, super fine diameter blades to create the hair-like strokes in our client's skin. The reason why we would choose this blade now that we have the option over this blade is the fact that we are opening less skin. We're causing less trauma, therefore getting more natural healed results and getting a longer life out of our client being able to come back from microblading. A note on nanoblades or ultra nanoblades is the fact that there is a myth out there that these blades are actually sharper than these blades. That is not true. The blade itself is not sharper than the other. This blade is just simply so much finer that it needs less pressure to open up the skin and create the beautiful hair-like stroke, right? It's opening less surface, so it needs less pressure. This is opening more surface, it needs more pressure. So that is where the difference in technique comes into play when you're using a nano or ultra nano blade versus a classic or a really old style blade like this one. It's not that one is sharper than the other, it's that one cuts through the skin much easier because it has to open less skin. It's where that term cuts like butter comes from. Not one is sharper than the other, it's all based on your pressure. And finally, the last difference that you may be noticing in these microblades is that this one here, it's gold, but not just because it's gold in color, it's actually metal wrapped. So it is wrapped in metal. So the blade is sticking out and then it is wrapped in metal. Whereas this one here, you can see that it is white, okay? And the U blade, it's wrapped in black, okay? These two blades are wrapped in PVC plastic. They're not wrapped in metal. So we call these a flexi blade versus a hard blade. The way you can tell, other than it being labeled that way on the packaging and that one will be wrapped in metal and one will be wrapped in plastic, is if you actually push on the blade. So once you have your blade assembled, a flexi blade will move pretty easily, even in your own assembled pen. Whereas a hard blade is going to be a lot harder to move. Do you see how we're not getting any flex in there? It's not a flexi blade, it's a hard blade. Now, that is the main difference between the two. Why choose one over the other? I would like to say a flexi blade gives you more artistic freedom. It's a little bit more flexible. It flexes in the skin, but you do have to keep into account when we pushed on it like this, it flexes. Same thing is going to happen when you put it to the skin. If you push too hard, it's going to flex one way or another. Whereas this hard blade is not going to flex at all. I find hard blade a lot easier for newer artists to at least start with or at least practice with, because it allows you to get muscle memory of making the stroke without worrying about the blade flexing in the skin and depositing the pigment at the incorrect angle. So that's it, your anatomy of a microblade. You got pre-assembled, non-pre-assembled. You have the length, so how many pins there are. You have the diameter of the pins, and then you have whether it is flexi or hard. The anatomy of a microblade.